How's that look? Not yet, but everyone sees this cover sheet.
Yeah, that looks better. Yeah.
Launch right in. So anyone can feel free to interrupt as we go through this. So the code team asked me to talk about my 20 plus years of higher ed consulting, which is mostly these three bullets here. I was hired in 2021 by Charlie Newman, the university architect, and then worked at Penn through 2019, and then at Rowan for about 9 months before that position was terminated by the pandemic, unfortunately. So a good part of my career, although I'm so old that it's only about half, was working as an administrator in higher ed, which is fascinating, super rewarding, really fun. A lot of the tenor of this presentation may feel kind of gripey, and that's unfortunate because I want to focus on why we don't do more, which is kind of like sets me up to be a little bit gripey, but really it was a really, for the most part, joyous experience with really terrific colleagues. So what is sustainability in higher education, right? That's the topic for today. So, do we want to talk about these things? Are these things the most important? How do we order the structure of the discussion? Why does it matter? The answer is all these things are about sustainability in higher ed. So what I'm going to talk about today is defining what we mean by sustainability. I mean, this is a pretty sophisticated audience, so that's going to be really quick and kind of in a way lighthearted, or thought-provoking instead of educational, if you will. But in understanding universities, I want to talk about both the complexity and the hierarchy and authority, because those are the things that provide the opportunities, but also provide the barriers for achieving more sustainable outcomes. And then what does sustainability offices do? I directed the Office of Sustainability, or what we call Penn Sustainability. When I was at Penn, I was supposed to take up that mantle at Rowan, which is really in a funny place. It's probably about 10 or 20 years behind some other institutions in addressing these issues formally. But the pandemic just terminated the position, and I didn't get a chance to look at that. And then what's of interest to this audience, perhaps, or would be for me if I were a consulting architect, is like, who decides? And the critical question is, why isn't every building at Penn LEED Platinum, right? There's enough money. It's become routine to build buildings with per square foot construction budgets of well over $1,000. So what is keeping an institution like Penn from achieving higher outcomes, higher standards? And finally, just because it's of interest to architects, what does it take to get to work there? So let's kick off with sustainability approaches. I used to give a class. I used to give a class on sustainability in higher ed. So I have plenty to talk about, and a lot of these slides are drawn from my teaching days. So it was it's a full semester, 3 hours once a week. So I've had to edit, but I used to talk to students about these different approaches to sustainability, right? Deep ecology, probably familiar with these type of conceptions, these types of formulations. The goal is that we move towards a more balanced footprint experience on the planet, where we share all the resources, all the benefits of a biodiverse and healthy ecosystems with all other living species for all time. A lot of people, a lot of architects too, because a lot of architects are first adopters, they're little techies, are intrigued by, this stuff, right? The technological utopias that we can create with the power of our massive brain. This is a couple years old, this article from Forbes, science fiction movie with a lot of shoot 'em up, Matt Damon punching people. For a lot of young folks, the idea that we can transform our culture through political action is really appealing, but it's not new. I mean, these slides were made, I don't know, this is probably an 8-10-year-old slide, but I drew from, in the class, I would talk about Jimmy Carter's forming the Department of Energy and talking about energy as energy independence and energy supply as the moral equivalent of war. But all these things have resurfaced in the Biden administration and are actually being executed, as this group knows as well as anyone. Is it New Green Deal light, and does it leave a lot on the table? Of course it does, but this is a real worthwhile and potential potentially fecund view of what sustainability means, right? And then to shift a little bit, a lot of times people think about sustainability in this way, right? Intentional communities. This is like a co-housing project in London. This resonates with people of my generation. It's by no means a real intentional community, but rich architectural heritage is here, as well as an environmental sensibility, which is all too often lost in development projects. I'd love to show this slide because it reminds me of my friend who passed way too early, Musco, but this is widely quoted. It's kind of comical. He used to joke about how many languages this one paragraph has been translated into. But he says the word, and it's worth reading, the word sustainable has roots in the Latin subtenere, meaning to hold up or to support from below. A community must be supported from below by its inhabitants, present and future. Certain places, through the peculiar combination of physical, cultural, and perhaps spiritual characteristics, inspire people to care for their community. And these are the places where sustainability is the best chance to take hold. And in a very real sense, universities and colleges are intentional communities, right? Everyone working there had to apply for a job, and often with very stiff competition. The students actually pay to be there, right? So this is an intentional community. And universities are intentional communities in that they articulate in a very public way their values and their purposes. Now, higher ed is really getting knocked in a way which is beyond reason in popular culture in the last half decade or so. But there is a really strong value statement about universities and why they exist, and sustainability should be, and often is, seen as one of the core drivers of why they exist and what their purpose is. Okay, to shift gears a little bit, I used to tell my students about a different version of sustainability, of preparing for the absolute worst and self-reliance and all this stuff that comes along with the kind of prepper movement. But that's not what higher ed is about at universities. So this sounds like a little bit of a retreat, but what I used to tell, we used to tell students is that sustainability at most universities is kind of like a shallow ecology, right? We talked about deep ecology. Universities aren't interested in deep ecology. They're not interested in restructuring the relationship, of man with other species or with the capitalist culture, etc. It's really a focus on conservation, conserving energy, conserving resources, pollution prevention, waste minimization, reduce consumption, focus on human experience and health, right? We want to get rid of toxins. There was a movement, and this is a long time ago now because it was way overdue, but get mercury out of hospitals, for instance, make the campus clean and safe. COVID brought that to the fore again. And something that universities can adopt without changing any single thing that they do in any other realm is adopt use of renewable energy. So what I used to tell my students, again, is at Penn, we're not talking about fundamental reorientation. The primary mission is teaching, research, leadership in an industrial Western capitalist society, and that is not going to change. And my job as sustainability director was not to be an eco warrior and burn the place down to rebuild a better future, but to work within the system, right? This is the least flattering photo I think as anyone has ever taken of me. This is I was with a bunch of undergraduates. It's pretty embarrassing. We were playing Guitar Hero in a bar. Someone snapped a picture. So no pride at stake here. I just want to, that's the purpose of that slide, that photo. So the climate action plan is executed by bureaucrats working in a $4 billion a year corporation. It takes a long time to change a community. Chiche was saying, Pagono, Pogono, di Matolo, stick by stick, you build the bundle, right? So one thing at a time. So now I'm going to shift, gone about 10 minutes, to understanding the university. And this is kind of, a blizzard of facts and figures is not that important, but you get the sense of what a place like, and I focus on Penn as like an N of one, right? Because that's where I worked. So that's my story. 290 acres, 14 million square feet. It's 14 70-story high rises downtown, 40,000 person community, 12 undergraduate, graduate professional schools, and then all sorts of holdings, right? A health system, the Morris Arboretum, New Bolton Center, which is a 70-acre large animal vet campus near Kennett Square, real estate holdings. It's a very, very, very wealthy place. It's probably the 4th or 6th most wealthy university in the known universe, with an endowment of well over $20 billion. I mean, that's go to the moon money. I mean, it's a lot. And the annual budget at Penn is about $4 billion, including the hospital. So this is a major, major corporation. It's interesting to look at the growth of campus, right? So started in West Philly in 1872 with one building. By 30 years later, it was a small campus focused on the southwest portion of this part of University City, and then continued to grow into the campus we know today. And big hallmarks, I guess, in the 50s was when they buried the trolley line under Woodland Avenue and closed Locust Street, which really made Penn feel a lot more like a walled campus, more like Harvard or UVA than Columbia, or, well, Columbia has a campus as well, but certainly like NYU or Temple, which is just buildings on city streets. And one of the interesting things that became a big focus for the facilities department when I was there was this chart, which was created by Ken Ogawa, the director of operations and maintenance. What this shows in red is the cumulative additive square footage, and that's registered to the numbers on the right from 0 to almost 14 million square feet. But the bars in blue are the per decade addition in millions of square feet. So you see in the 60s and 70s, there was an enormous spurt of government funding that resulted in big expansion of campus. Now, for sustainability professionals, this should send up all the red flags immediately, right? We have a campus with looking at the registry on the right, 6 or 7 or 8 million square feet of space that was built in probably the worst ecological or environmental building traditions in the last 100 years, right? So the buildings in the 20s and 30s and 40s were much easier to maintain, much easier to heat and cool than some of the buildings made in the 60s and 70s with experimental systems, sealed buildings for the first time, et cetera. So they were a lot of times the big energy hogs on campus, which required an enormous amount of retrofitting to bring them up to what we see as a normal code and energy performance today. So I'll just go through this. I think I'm running a little bit short on time, but the environmental footprint is probably 80% energy use. And the energy use is electricity, steam, chilled water, which is electricity, and very, very little natural gas. You see on the pie chart there, electricity and steam is about half the cost, equal half the cost each. The big breakthrough for Penn was that since this spring, a multi-year, probably it's taking about 6 or 7 years with setbacks during the pandemic, a power purchase agreement which has built solar fields over well over 1,000 acres in central Pennsylvania has been paid for by Penn, brought new renewable energy into our regional grid, and the benefits of all that green power through the magic of accounting rules is going exclusively to Penn. So the electricity that Penn uses, over 75% of Penn's electrical budget, is completely carbon free because of this addition to our regional grid. And that is an enormous achievement. No small amount of effort and cajoling and persistence by the leadership at the university. However, it is interesting that this doesn't change a thing about how the university operates on the ground, right? The high-level administrative decision was made to pursue this goal. They fought it through and have cut the carbon footprint of campus by probably 45% or so with one fell swoop. And it's also the strategy that most universities have adopted. Most universities are serious about sustainability have adopted by now, because it's the delivery for renewable power.
Something out front. I don't know what it was. Yeah, I didn't look very close.
The process for delivering renewable power is not quite as easy as buying sausage at the butcher, but it's almost that easy. The contracts, the RFPs, the consulting services, and the deliverables, and the firms that will help you out are really well established, and the process is very mature. So when we first floated this idea around 2016, it was seen as very risky, and let's put it off for a couple of years. But we overcame that because the industry has matured so much. So just to move on some of these complexity issues, this is a line diagram of underground utilities and services. There's over 20 miles of steam pipes, electrical bus duct, and chilled water pipes. And the initial assessment that we did was revealing. This was done by a guy named Bill Bram, Dr. Bill Bram, in the School of Design and the TC, at the time, the TC Chan Center. We paid grad students, so it was really cheap. We found out, no surprise, labs are the biggest type of building that is responsible for emissions, and equipment of all the things in the buildings uses the most, is responsible for the most emissions. So if you focused on lab buildings and making equipment more efficient, it would be the smartest thing you can do. A couple other things about the university. Very little combustion on Penn's campus. There's not boilers in the basement. There's not gas-fired boilers or oil boilers. It's all systematized with central heating and cooling, district heating and cooling. But it does have a fleet. Actually, it's much more than 200 vehicles. I just wrote that last night. It's more like 400. Penn has the 5th largest police force in the state. The purchasing office, paper clips, contracts, copy paper, printing services, spends over $1 billion a year, well over 250 tons of waste. Catering services, it's amazing. There was a student that published a newspaper article about going, she made a point of going an entire week without buying any food, just finding receptions at Penn and going to receptions for all 3 meals a day for 7 days straight. And she wrote it up as an amusing student paper article. 4 cafeterias, 7,500 student beds, all these things are part of the campus. Now, how is this place run? It's pretty opaque if you don't work at a university. A lot of people think Penn is like kind of monolithic and there's a few decision makers. So I just want to review the structure of the thing, right? I'm not going to talk about the hospital. It's $1 billion a year enterprise or more. But when you think of the university, the first thing most people think about are what we think of as the provost's departments or the provostial organization, which is the schools. Penn has 12 schools: Wharton Med School, School of Design, Vet School, Annenberg School for Communications. And that's all of those things are under the provost. The president has a number of direct reports: government relations, the university secretary. President Gutman wanted diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically to report to her. But the business side of the university and other administrative functions fall under a position at Penn, and this is not uncommon at other universities, of executive vice president or executive vice president and treasurer or something like that. All of the things that make the institution run as a business are under that, including the facilities department. The term we use at Penn, facilities and real estate services. So what is in that? That's usually the place where sustainability offices are headquartered, and it's also the place that we as architects interface with universities. So it's real estate. We have a real estate division. We develop buildings. We manage all the rental buildings on campus. The idea of real estate is not to make money, but it's to support the university mission and the culture and the people that work there, right? So that's why we have so many coffee shops, etc. I worked in the university architect's office. The university architect is responsible for master planning, campus design, campus landscape, wayfinding, documentation, which is important because at a place like Penn, schools pay for space in terms of square footage, and it has to be carefully documented, and when it changes, get updated. Facilities also does project management, right? This is a lot of you guys interface with project managers at universities. The O&M team is the biggest, and that also includes the energy procurement, energy management. And then there's administration of finance. So the vice president of facilities and real estate has 5 direct reports. The sustainability function is in the university architect at Penn, which is unusual. In most of the Ivy schools and the Ivy Plus schools, the sustainability director reports directly to the vice president, or is on a par with the vice president of facilities and real estate and reports directly to the executive vice president. But David Hollenberg was my boss for 12 years, one of the best bosses I've ever had. And he really wanted that work to be under his remit. And he was a terrific supporter and advocate for what we were trying to do. Just in background, there's about 120 professionals, white collar people, sit at desks and look at computers all day. There were some years where the University of Pennsylvania built $1 million of construction per day, over $365 million in construction in one calendar year. Over 650 unionized mechanics and all the blue collar staff, and they're all unionized. And my team, when I was working there, was never up to 6, but we had we usually had 4 people, and the roles were a director, analyst, project manager, and a general support person. So you don't need a big staff if you have an effective way to get the entire university on board with the sustainability plan. So I'm going to skip this slide and go back to the deans. The most important thing to know is that a place like University of Pennsylvania, the schools and the deans are really independent. They raise their own money, they set their own budget, they hire their own people, they pursue their own research grants, they set the curriculum, and in a lot of ways, the deans don't, they see their peers as deans at other schools, more so sometimes than their colleagues at Penn. They really function as almost independent organizations. So when people think, you know, I have an idea, Penn should do something, it's important to understand like how the money flows. And I don't want to go into this too much, but I used to in my class. The University of Pennsylvania uses a system called Responsibility Center Management for internal budget and reporting. It was created in the 70s when Penn was going bankrupt. It's designed to control expenses and promote frugality, and also to enhance revenue generation. So each school controls its own income, and entrepreneurial activity is encouraged. The model is each tub has its own bottom, right? And everyone at Penn talks about this like it's the best invention since canned cat food, right? It saves us from making all sorts of terrible decisions. Well, it also makes it very hard to collaborate, share resources, and it creates all sorts of friction and inefficiencies. So there are detractors about this as well. And it creates competition. Deans wind up competing for students and money and grants. And, you know, a lot of times competition doesn't work out the way you want. This, I don't want to get into too many anecdotes. This building is shared by 2 schools, and deferred maintenance was delayed for decades because they were fighting over which school, School of Engineering and Applied Science and School of Arts and Sciences, would pay. And so there are these downsides. So in the Responsibility Management Center program, there are 2 types of entities. There's revenue generating, like the schools and academic centers, and non-revenue generating, like facilities or university life or libraries. Nobody goes to the library. They go to the school of, you know, they go to Wharton Business School. So they have to share the money. The revenue generating entities have these responsibilities, have to operate their own budgets and contribute to pay for the rest of the campus. And the other non-revenue centers have to maintain a budget and provide services, right? Shovel of snow. So I modeled this for my students, right? You have schools, you have academic centers, you have administrative units, you have business services, 12 schools. I don't have to go into this because I'm running out of time. One of the big income generators is tuition. But the way the tuition money is split up is complicated, right? 60% goes to the school where the course is taught, 20% stays in the student's home school, 20% goes into the central university. And by the end of this is about 12-slide sequence, this is how the money at Penn flows around: gifts, grants, sales, subvention, reimbursement, etc. But the outcome is that authority at a place like Penn is widely distributed and influence is unevenly wielded. And there's a lot of reliance on inertia. That organizational structure makes it much easier to stop something than start something. And you can have a very, very highly respected, successful career at Penn by saying no to everything your entire career. And you get a gold watch and you retire. Because it's very risk averse. Because so processes are perpetuated far longer than would be tolerated in other environments. And there's a lot of reliance on inertia and continuity and tradition and things like that. But sustainability, again, I don't have to tell this audience, it depends on changing the way you do things. And you must reward risk taking. So it can be a tricky job. But it is possible, it's just slow. So I want to jump to what the Sustainability Office, this is the homepage of the Sustainability Office site at Penn. Currently, my friend Nina Morris took over for me when I left. We have 7 initiatives, and the guiding built environment, climate and energy, natural environment, that's new. I didn't have anything to do with that. Recycling and waste, wellness, that's also new. Civic engagement, I created that. I'm proud of that. We never did anything about food, but we did do procurement and transportation. So now there's 9. I had 5, I guess. And the guiding document is the plan, right? So every 5 years, you get volunteers. It takes about 18 months. You get committees, 1 committee for each of these things to go forward. And you say, what can we accomplish? What resources will it take? And it's pretty serious work. And I was really lucky. I had a terrific team, including one guy who's now the sustainability director at Hopkins, who really took the lead on Climate Action Plan 3.0, which was by far the best we've done. And they're working on 4 now. We do it every 5 years, so it maintains relevance. And you set goals, carbon neutral by 2042, right? My team wrote the text with the input from all these folks. I wrote the introduction. I was really proud of that. My opportunity to wax poetic. But once the plan has been approved, it's the operationalization is not my job. It's everybody, right? So it's the deans have to follow the plan. And most of what the Sustainability Office does is outreach and education. So most of the work on a day-to-day basis is making sure that everyone understands the plan, then knows what their role is. So you do the easy things. You make a website. You do affinity groups. So we had staff eco reps, we had student eco reps, we had faculty eco reps, we had faculty symposiums. We did Green Fund Awards, where we gave money out to anyone who had a good idea. That gets a lot of attention. Personal note, some of you may know, my current wife, my only wife, my current wife, my wife applied for a Green Fund grant. I gave her $50,000, right? That gave me a lot of leverage for the second date, I think. And it's a happy ending. We did events seasonally. We did move in. We did move out. We did collaborations with the provost. So most of the work is about outreach, and it's really hard to get through the clutter of all the activity and the publications and the publicity at a place like 40,000 person university community. But so, for example, this part of the plan, climate and energy, I started with some faculty friends. I started the idea of the power purchase agreement because other schools were doing it. But once it got some momentum, it was led by the O&M team, great professionals, and they pushed it through and it was successful, right? So the built environment, all those decisions are made by the staff in the university architect's office with input from other stakeholders. But David Hollenberg was really strong on supporting the university landscape architects and we got the campus certified as an arboretum and really made some strong strides forward in green landscape maintenance practices. So the university sustainability staff can't be and doesn't have to be experts in all these things. Like I said before, the procurement office spends $1 billion a year, right? And we had a great leader in the director of the purchasing office, and he created a basically it's a carbon offset program, and everything about carbon offsets is kind of makes you feel queasy. But one of the big drivers for Penn's carbon footprint was air travel. And now everyone that travels on Penn's dime pays into a fund to help offset the impact of air travel. And that was all done by the procurement office. Well, we supported it, and we, did a lot of research with them, but they drove that. So once the plan is established, you can get a lot done with a very small team, because but you need good partners. And that was part of the job, is to cultivate the enthusiasm in those partners. We had good fleet directors, really working hard to cut down on the amount of people that commute alone to Penn. So back to what we talk about as architects. Who makes decisions? It is different every time. It's certainly not the sustainability director. Oh, this is a little. The university architect has a lot of influence. David used to say, everyone at Penn has influence, but there's very little authority. No one can just plant a flag and say, we're doing this. So when he was university architect, he was often overruled, and he was such a good professional. He never complained. He said every building that we did was the best building ever. I told him he was like a dad who had, 3 kids that went to Harvard and one that wound up in jail. And he said, oh, I love them all, because he never said anything bad about the bad buildings that we built, even the ones that didn't turn out so well, the protracted lawsuit at the end. But in terms of building design and building goals, he could be overruled all the time by trustees, by the president, by deans, somebody else. So it required a lot of influence, right? Just personal influence, but no authority. A lot of times the trustees themselves stepped in and said, I want it to be like this. And that was always invariably a bad outcome. We are professionals. Architects are professionals. Malcolm Gladwell's rubric about 10,000 hours of practice to make you an expert is true. People would say, oh, Amy Gutman was a great theorist on human rights and democracy. She's not an architect, and she shouldn't be making decisions about architecture, but she often did. But she hasn't spent 10,000. How many times have you redrawn the Roby House and studied the plans of buildings and read about architecture? There's no substitute for that capability, but a lot of people think that they. So that was a big problem with decision making about buildings. I shouldn't go on any further about that. In the process of making decisions, a lot of stakeholders are marginalized in a place like Penn. Just the hierarchy does not permit community members, students, other advocates to get a voice. And that's just the way it goes. So this is the question. And, Harvard has probably 40 or 50 LEED Platinum projects. Penn has none. There's not one solar panel on Penn's campus. We have the Morris Arboretum Horticulture Center, which is platinum. It's all about leadership. The Horticulture Center trustees, or whatever they were called, the leaders, said this has to be a LEED Platinum building. It's in our arboretum. But nobody has ever said that for the main campus. Programming and stakeholder identification is really undervalued at most institutions. Decisions are made by the key decision makers, and they don't reach out to get more information, to get more input. The driving value at a place like Penn, if you go to Penn, look around, it's not sustainability, it's aesthetics. The aesthetic quality of the campus is off the charts. And that is, it's never said out loud, right? But it's evident by the results. So I think that's the goal there. And in a big institution, a lot of bureaucrats are driven by, if it's good enough, it's good enough. We shouldn't risk trying to be more, right? LEED Silver is sufficient. We want a predictable outcome. advocate, I can tell you from personal experience, advocating for sustainability does not win you any friends at a place like that. And given the hierarchical organization of a campus, it's very hard to advocate from a position where you don't have authority and you don't have power. So what I used to tell my staff, you can't push a rope. We can have the best idea, but people listen to the person that they report to, that gives them their job evaluation at the end of the year, that tells them what their raise is going to be. A lot of folks don't listen to the people that work for them or that they don't report to. And so advocates for sustainability have a hard time getting that voice heard. Oh, shoot, I'm really over time here. LCA, is there any hope? The hardest thing about LEED Platinum building at a place like Penn is deciding to do it. All this will change in the next generation. Absolutely certain. It's just a matter of deciding that it's more of a priority. Okay, I have one more slide. I might as well show it. Getting the attention of facilities administrators. How do you get a job at Penn? People that are successful are relentless about getting on the radar. Anyone at Penn could be a person that might wind up being important. Not anyone, but if you can make a connection with decision makers, really understanding the goals of the client and the culture is essential. David Hollenberg used to give young firms and new firms he didn't know literally 15-minute interviews. So be prepared to make a case. The final question he used to ask all the time was, sometimes I would sit in, especially if I knew the people, he'd say, what would be your ideal project? If you had one project that you could just hit out of the ballpark without any prep and without any special research, you're the absolute expert in this project, what would it be? And he listened to what people said. And so there's no magic way to get onto the list of providers, but those are the only things that came to mind for me. So